Commander Vex'tar of the Hegemony Fleet stared at the human delegation through his compound eyes, mandibles clicking with barely concealed amusement. Oh, how precious they looked. 3 little bipeds sitting across the negotiation table in their pathetic excuses for environmental suits. The lead delegate, some wrinkled old male called Ambassador Hartwell, kept shuffling papers with trembling hands. Beside him sat a younger male, Lieutenant Colonel Mason, whose jaw muscles kept twitching like a broken servo motor, and then there was her, the female they'd introduced as Dr. Lydia Voss, their linguistics specialist. She sat perfectly still, unremarkable brown hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, wearing simple black clothing that screamed, "I'm nobody important." Her pale blue eyes moved occasionally, taking in the massive war chamber aboard Vex'tar's flagship, the Eternal Dominion. She hadn't spoken a single word during the entire 3-hour preliminary discussion. So, Ambassador Hartwell, Vex'tar's voice resonated through the translation matrix, his amusement bleeding through every syllable. Your species wishes to negotiate for continued existence on the outer rim worlds? He paused dramatically, letting his secondary arms spread wide while his primary arms remained folded. How delightfully optimistic of you. Hartwell's face flushed red. Commander Vex'tar, Earth's colonies have coexisted peacefully. Vex'tar's mandibles clacked together in what passed for laughter among his kind. Your mining operations have disrupted 3 sacred burial sites, your agricultural domes have poisoned 2 rivers, and don't get me started on that monstrosity you call New Detroit. He leaned forward on his 6 legs, towering over the human delegation. You've had 2 standard years to comply with hegemony regulations. Instead, you've, what's that charming human expression, oh yes, thumbed your noses at us. Lieutenant Colonel Mason's hand drifted toward his sidearm before Hartwell grabbed his wrist. Smart move, considering the dozen hegemony warriors positioned around the chamber, each one capable of tearing a human in half without breaking their equivalent of a sweat. We've prepared a comprehensive compliance proposal, Hartwell said, sliding a data pad across the polished metal table. Our xenobiology teams have identified alternative sites for, alternative sites? Vex'tar picked up the data pad with one claw and promptly crushed it. The satisfying crunch of breaking electronics echoed through the chamber. Ambassador, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even Vex'tar's own warriors shifted slightly, recognizing the tone their commander used just before ordering planetary bombardments. You see, Vex'tar continued, his voice taking on the silky quality of a predator toying with wounded prey, this isn't actually a negotiation. This is us being, shall we say, politely informative. The Hegemony Council has already decided the fate of your colonies. Hartwell's face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. What are you saying? I'm saying, my dear Ambassador, that in exactly 72 hours, every human settlement in the Kepler 442 system will be reduced to their component atoms. Vex'tar's secondary arms gestured to the massive viewscreen behind him, displaying the human colonies like tiny glowing dots against the darkness of space. Your orbital stations, your mining platforms, your precious agricultural domes, even that garish casino on Kepler 442b's third moon, all of it will simply cease to exist. You can't do this. Mason shot to his feet, his hand now fully on his weapon. There are over 2 million civilians, can't? Vex'tar's laugh was like grinding metal. Lieutenant Colonel, the hegemony has erased 17 species from existence in the past millennium. Your little collection of dirt scratchers and rock chewers hardly presents a challenge. For the first time since entering the chamber, Dr. Lydia Voss moved. She reached into her jacket pocket, every hegemony warrior in the room tensed, weapons partially drawn. Vex'tar raised one primary arm, halting them. Let the little human female make whatever pathetic gesture she had planned. Perhaps she wanted to record a final message for her loved ones? How wonderfully sentimental, but instead of a recording device or a weapon, she pulled out what appeared to be a small, unremarkable black cube. About the size of a human fist, completely smooth, with no visible markings or interfaces. She set it gently on the table between them. "Dr. Voss," Hartwell whispered urgently. "What are you, Commander Vex'tar?" she said quietly, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady, almost conversational. "Before you finalize your plans, I think there's something you should know about human linguistics." The silence that followed was so complete that the subtle hum of the ship's engine seemed deafeningly loud. Vex'tar found himself genuinely curious. "Oh? And what might that be, Doctor?" "Well," she continued, still in that same calm tone, "when humans study alien languages, we don't just learn vocabulary and grammar. We study everything. Cultural context, historical references, social hierarchies." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Communication protocols." "Fascinating," Vex'tar said dryly. "I'm sure your academic achievements are quite impressive, but, military communication protocols," she interrupted. Something cold crawled up Vex'tar's spine. Around the chamber, his warriors were beginning to look uncertain. Dr. Voss reached over and touched the black cube. It began to glow with a soft blue light. "You see, Commander, 3 years ago, your government sent a cultural exchange delegation to Earth. Very diplomatic, very proper. They shared so much with us." Her smile was small and didn't reach her eyes. "Language matrices, cultural databases, historical archives. And tucked away in all that data, well, let's just say your people are very thorough record keepers." The blue glow from the cube was getting brighter. "Doctor," Vex'tar said slowly, his earlier amusement completely gone, "what exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Commander. I'm stating a fact." She leaned forward slightly. "I know your real name isn't Vex'tar. It's third clutch subordinate Crixnell of the Bloodied Claw Nest, currently serving under falsified credentials after that unfortunate incident on Proxima Station." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "I know that this ship, the Eternal Dominion, is actually running on 73% power because your engineering crews have been selling replacement parts on the black market." Her voice remained maddeningly calm. "I know that the Hegemony Council never authorized this operation, and that you're hoping a successful genocide will cover up the fact that you've been embezzling military supplies for the past 4 years." Vex'tar's mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a clear sign of agitation among his species. "And most importantly," Dr. Voss continued, reaching over to adjust something on the glowing cube, "I know the exact command frequencies for every single ship in your fleet." The cube's blue glow suddenly intensified, bathing the entire chamber in azure light. "You're lying," Vex'tar snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" She tilted her head again, and for the first time, there was something predatory in her expression. "Computer, display current fleet positions." The main view screen behind Vex'tar flickered and changed, showing a tactical display of his entire fleet. 47 ships arranged in perfect formation around the human colonies. "Impressive fleet," she said conversationally. "Shame about the security vulnerabilities." Vex'tar spun around to stare at the display, his multiple eyes widening. The tactical screen was showing details it should never display to anyone outside the Hegemony command structure. Ship names, weapon loadouts, crew complements, even individual officer assignments. "How are you accessing?" "Oh, that's the beautiful thing about being underestimated," Dr. Voss said, standing up from her chair. "People tend to share all sorts of interesting information when they think you're just a harmless little translator." The cube on the table was now pulsing rhythmically, and Vex'tar realized with growing horror that the pulse matched the frequency of Hegemony military communications. "You see, Commander Crixnell," she continued, using his real name like a weapon, "humans have this wonderful trait called adaptability. When someone threatens to exterminate 2 million of our people, we adapt. We plan. We prepare." She walked slowly around the table, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the metal deck. "And sometimes," she said, stopping directly beside Vex'tar's command throne, "we infiltrate. That's when the alarm started blaring. The piercing wail of emergency klaxons filled the command chamber as red warning lights bathed everything in hellish crimson. Vex'tar's compound eyes darted frantically between his tactical displays and the impossibly calm human female standing beside his throne. "Status report," he bellowed into his communicator, his voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "Commander," came the frantic reply from his bridge crew. "All ships are reporting simultaneous communication failures. Command frequencies are being overridden." Dr. Lydia Voss smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You know what I love about advanced civilizations like yours, Crixnell," she said conversationally, as if alarms weren't screaming and his entire fleet wasn't falling apart around them. "You become so dependent on your technology that you forget the most basic rule of warfare." What have you done?" Vex'tar's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like a broken data transmission. "Rule number 1, she continued, ignoring his question. "Never give your enemy access to your communication networks." She gestured toward the glowing cube on the table. "Even if that access comes gift-wrapped as a cultural exchange program." On the main view screen, Vex'tar watched in growing horror as his perfect fleet formation began to dissolve. Ships were breaking from their assigned positions, moving erratically, some even turning their weapons toward each other. "This is impossible," he snarled. "Hegemony encryption is unbreakable. Our systems are designed by a species that thinks in hierarchical command structures," Dr. Voss interrupted. "Very predictable. Very logical. Very crackable." She walked back to the cube and pressed her palm against its surface. "Humans, on the other hand, we think sideways. We think chaotically. We think in ways that make absolutely no sense to anyone else." Ambassador Hartwell and Lieutenant Colonel Mason were staring at her with expressions of pure bewilderment. Clearly, this hadn't been part of their briefing. 3 years ago, when your cultural delegation visited Earth, she continued, they were so proud to share their advanced technology with the primitive humans. They demonstrated your translation matrices, your communication protocols, even your military frequencies. All in the spirit of interspecies cooperation, of course. The cube's blue glow was spreading, tendrils of light reaching across the table like digital fingers. "What they didn't know," she said, her voice taking on an almost sing-song quality, "is that every single human linguist, anthropologist, and cultural specialist who attended those demonstrations was actually a military intelligence officer." Vex'tar felt his heart skip a beat. "All 4 of them." "You're lying," he whispered, but even he didn't believe it anymore. "Operation Babel," she said simply. "Named after an old human myth about languages and hubris. 47 of our best intelligence operatives spent 3 years embedded in academic positions, studying every scrap of hegemony technology your people so graciously shared with us." The view screen now showed complete chaos. Some ships were firing randomly into space, others were spinning helplessly as their navigation systems failed. A few had gone completely dark. "We mapped your entire communication network," she continued. "Every frequency, every encryption key, every override protocol. Your people were so confident in their superiority that they never bothered to check if their primitive human students were taking notes." "Impossible!" Vex'tar roared, slamming his primary fists on the arms of his command throne. "Even if you had access to our communications, you couldn't control our ships. Our crews would never, wouldn't they?" Dr. Voss tilted her head with mock curiosity. "Tell me, Crixnell, what happens when a hegemony ship receives a priority alpha command from fleet headquarters?" Vex'tar's compound eyes widened in understanding and terror. "That's right," she said softly. "They obey without question. No verification protocols, no confirmation requests. Just instant, absolute compliance." She laughed, and the sound was sharp as broken glass. After all, who would be insane enough to try hijacking hegemony military frequencies? On the screen, more ships were beginning to move in coordinated patterns. Not Vex'tar's patterns. Someone else's. You see, she continued, walking slowly around the chamber as hegemony warriors watched helplessly, your ships aren't malfunctioning. They're following orders. My orders. The realization hit Vex'tar like a plasma torpedo to the brain. You're commanding my fleet. Our fleet, she corrected pleasantly. As of 17 minutes ago, every ship in this battle group received new operational parameters directly from Hegemony High Command. She made air quotes around the last two words. Signed, sealed, and authenticated with your own command codes. This is an act of war. Vex'tar sputtered. No, she replied, her voice suddenly hard as steel. Threatening to exterminate 2 million civilians is an act of war. This is just good strategy. Lieutenant Colonel Mason finally found his voice. Dr. Voss, what exactly did you tell them to do? She glanced at him with genuine warmth. Oh, the usual new orders, Colonel. Stand down weapons systems, prepare for inspection by Hegemony Internal Affairs, submit all personnel records for corruption investigation. She paused. And my personal favorite, transfer all command authority to the ranking hegemony officer present. There is no ranking hegemony officer present. Vex'tar shouted. I'm in command of this fleet. Actually, she said, pulling a second device from her pocket, according to these freshly transmitted orders from Hegemony High Command, 3rd Clutch Subordinate Crixnell has been relieved of duty pending investigation for embezzlement, falsifying credentials, and unauthorized military action. She activated the device, and Vex'tar's own voice filled the chamber, speaking in perfect hegemony military protocol. All ships, this is Commander Vex'tar. I am hereby transferring Fleet Command to Special Investigator Lydia Voss of Hegemony Internal Affairs, operating under Emergency Authorization Omega-77 Alpha. The silence that followed was deafening. You used my own voice, Vex'tar whispered. 47 different recordings over 3 years of cultural exchanges, she confirmed. Amazing what you can do with modern audio synthesis technology. Your translation matrix made it even easier, since it already had perfect vocal mapping for human-to-hegemony communication. On the view screen, the fleet had now arranged itself in perfect defensive formation around the human colonies. Weapons were powered down, shields were lowered, and every single ship was broadcasting surrender codes. So here's what's going to happen, Crixnell, Dr. Voss said, settling back into her chair like she owned the place. You and your crews are going to be very quietly transferred to hegemony custody for a very thorough investigation. Your ships will be impounded as evidence. And the colonies will remain exactly where they are, under the protection of what is now technically a hegemony defense fleet. The real hegemony will never believe this. Vex'tar snarled. They'll send another fleet. A real fleet. Will they? She asked innocently. Because according to the reports I've been filing with Hegemony Command for the past 6 months, this entire operation was an unauthorized military action by a corrupt officer attempting to start an illegal war to cover up his crimes. She smiled sweetly. In fact, Special Investigator Voss has been working tirelessly to prevent a diplomatic incident that could have destabilized the entire sector. Ambassador Hartwell was staring at her with something approaching awe. You've been planning this for months. Years, she corrected. The moment your people decided to threaten human civilians, they made it our problem. And humans, Ambassador, are very good at solving problems. She stood up and walked to the view screen, gazing out at the now pacified fleet. We're also very good at making sure the problem stays solved. Vex'tar slumped in his command throne, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. What are you? Dr. Lydia Voss turned back to him, and for just a moment, he saw something in her pale blue eyes that made his exoskeleton crawl. Something patient, calculating, and utterly ruthless. I'm exactly what you thought I was, Commander, she said quietly. I'm a translator. I translate threats into consequences, arrogance into humility, and genocide into justice. She picked up the glowing cube from the table. I also translate the word human into something that advanced civilizations should be very, very careful about underestimating. The alarms had finally stopped blaring, but somehow, the silence felt even more ominous. Oh, and Crixnell, she added, almost as an afterthought. Next time someone offers to teach you their language, you might want to ask what else they're learning while they're at it. With that, Dr. Lydia Voss, linguistics specialist and apparently the most dangerous human in known space, walked calmly toward the chamber exit, leaving behind a fleet of conquered ships and one very educational lesson about the dangers of underestimating translators. The universe, it seemed, had just learned that humans spoke fluent warfare.